how do you do this? Because I can imagine, certain business operators might really understand these 5 principles that you're talking about and see it, but there can be other groups where it's like, they don't get it. How do you bring them in? How long does it take somebody, or how long does it take let's say you introduce this to a leadership team, how much practice does it take before, they have some competency?
But sometimes there's a couple, either it's just the total chemistry of the group, or there's a couple leaders in that group who will be practicing something very similar, not even fully appreciating what they're practicing. Because that's what I did before the breakthrough, and saw this is what we're actually practicing. And the cool thing was that once I saw it, I could now deliberately practice and way better at what was already having the success that I have been having, but didn't really appreciate where that was coming from.
Lloyd, welcome to the Growth Stories podcast. So Lloyd, you're the founder of the Collaborative Way, and I'm so happy to have you on the show. Can you just start us off with, how did this come about? What led you to create the Collaborative Way in the first place?
Well, back in 1990, I was working with a company called Rodell, and they're the world leaders in providing the consumables used to polish silicon wafers to make computers. And at that time, there was this breakthrough, and they were, as I said, they were the world leaders in doing this. And there was a breakthrough in making computer chips called planarization, where they found how to put layers of printed circuits on one computer chip. One of the breakthroughs that allows us to do this today. And the owners of Rodell had the vision to recognize that their marketplace was going to explode, and that big guys were going to come in, the 3Ms, the Cabots, and they had more money, more PhDs to throw at this challenge than Rodell could possibly muster. And so they were reflecting on how are they going to meet this challenge. And I'd done some work with them to help merge 2 of their companies back together, that when the process had gotten kind of bogged down to 2 leadership teams, had a misunderstanding and really going at it. And I helped them settle that, and they had this merger, and we're working well together. So they said to me, Lloyd, we recognize the only way we're going to move forward, only way we can compete is to develop an extraordinary way of working together. Would you join me in doing that and join us in doing that? And I said, wow, sure. I mean, that's a consultant's dream,
Yeah.
And so we took off on this adventure, and I was doing the things most consultants would do, building leadership, deepening commitment, changing behaviors and all that. And I could see that while we were making progress, it didn't look like we're going to make enough progress to meet the vision they saw coming. And in confronting that, acknowledging that to myself, I had this breakthrough. It was like, well, then what do you do? And what I saw was that what you would need to do is to call out a small set of commitments or practices that would be the foundation for how we worked and related with one another. And they take on learning to work that way together, so that we shift from developing the individual as the focus to developing how we work together and learning together to do this. And
as you're describing this, I'm just imagining all these different stories and elements of this. I have a tiny bit of background. I worked in the Bay Area in semiconductor, and I did know some people that worked in planarization. So it's like, that's kind of funny. But it's always interesting how, if you have experience in teams that punch above their weight class, it's not necessarily because of star players where there's like one genius. It's something about the way that they're working. So I love how you're talking about shifting the focus from how do we make better single heroes to a team that plays well together.
yes, and so we called out 5 practices. It just somehow was obvious to me out of my experience of being on extraordinary teams and working with extraordinary teams. The first thing is we need to listen generously to each other. We need to learn to really listen for the value in what the other person's saying, lead with curiosity and intention to learn, backed up by this willingness to be influenced. And if we could catch ourselves when we're not doing that, and then return to center to what we're up to together, and then bring that generous curiosity forward, man, so just that alone can move a team together. And then if we're actually learning that together, and then the second practice is that we speak straight to each other. So we learn to speak in a way that's honest and forwarding, and at the same time, take some responsibility for how it hits the other person, and carefully that you're actually getting the message you intend across. And then the third one is that we're going to be for each other. So we're going to support each other's success. We're not just in it for ourselves, we're going to help the other person succeed. Sometimes that means really having challenging conversations with them, playing to their strengths, cleaning up misunderstandings with each other, intervening in gossip, not letting that kind of stuff undermine the trust. So that's, and then the fourth one is to honor our commitments. And to really good, first you have to establish a mutual understanding of what a commitment is, because we all assume we know what one is. It's the way we think about them. And then,
Hmm.
but if we get a mutual understanding, then we can't really learn together how to really good at honoring our commitments. And which is a little different than keeping them. Most of the time it means keeping them, but it's
Yeah.
honor the I made this commitment, and if I
Hmm.
keep it, I speak up the minute I realize this commitment is in danger and work it out with whomever I share it with. And that if someone makes a commitment to me, I'm in too. It's not just I get this go, oh, okay, good. Let's see if you can do it. Or, oh yeah, just like last time, you didn't do it,
Hmm.
And but if I accept a commitment like that, then I'm not honoring commitments myself. I'm in on the failure from the beginning. How can I really get all self-righteous and all bent out of shape that it didn't happen? I was predicting that. But there's so much of that kind of non-forwarding, reactive kind of behavior that's inside of commitments. And then lastly, that we're each a source of acknowledgement, appreciation up, down, and across the company, the team, so that we're looking for those opportunities and we actually come to recognize how important it is for each member of the team to be acknowledged, to be appreciated, and respected.
I love this so much already.
Learn, yes. And so when you learn, and we're learning and supporting each other and learning to operate this way, trued up by what we're up to, I mean, you can do extraordinary things.
I believe that. So each one of those is a very difficult. I mean, I would say of the things you mentioned, I think four of them are more common. The appreciation thing's a little rarer, I would say. But the first four, I would say that, there's people who work so hard just to get one of them. How do you get the first four? How do you get a whole team to buy in to putting in the effort for all four? I've worked at places where we've just, or where people have, or where the leadership team has tried to have a focus on one of those elements. Like perhaps commitments is very simple, easy one. Let's track and keep our commitments. Sounds very simple. How do you get a team to put the effort in on all these four or five sections?
Well, I find that when a group of people really gets this and they get it together and as a team, like, well, you say if we come into a company, we'll start with the top 12 leaders in a company usually. And when they start to see and taste what's possible by doing that, and that they're doing it together, it's not just I'm learning some skills and we're all learning some skills, but we've actually established this is a commitment to we're going to work together, and that we're taking on this framework of learning, context learning, where I'm going to do that uncomfortable work of supporting you in your practice, and I'm going to be open to receiving that support from you. And then when you start seeing the results, then and we have a way to deal with these things,
Mhm.
so like when the really difficult conversations come up, when someone would say, I really need to speak straight here. And then
Yeah.
everybody, okay, let's
Here
open
it
up
comes.
and we get time to get curious and get ready. And and then you start seeing the results of it. I mean, there's a company that's been practicing this collaborative way for over 30 years. When we started working with them, there were less than 500 people in the company. Today, they're approaching 3,000 and approaching 2 billion in revenues. And they see it as fundamental to their success, their practice of the collaborative way. So I think the answer to your question is when you start seeing the results, the tangible results of working in this way, and it begins to see that it's worth the uncomfortableness, because to work together in this way keeps putting you in the awkward and uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
So is it worth going through those awkward, and you start to see, and it's all centered towards forwarding what you're up to. That trues the practice. So we're not just listening generously for the sake of listening generously, but so as to accomplish what we're up to together.
Yeah. Well, I have one question that comes to mind just in this area of culture and behavior. Have you ever, I'm sure you have. I'd love to bounce this off you. So I've heard and I've been involved in leadership teams where someone in the executive group says, "Oh, we're rolling out a new culture." And then we put a project manager on it. They're really good. And the culture is due in the next quarter. It's fully rolled out. Um, what is good about this and where are the mistakes in just thinking you can roll out a new culture?
Well, you can't roll out a new culture. So in that way,
Yeah.
you can in terms of it takes for in my view, it takes first the leader in most almost all cases. Okay. There's some rare, but other than rare situations, it requires that the leadership first takes on this practice and takes on practicing this practice. And if you do, you're going to feel the people around him are going to be immediately feeling the difference. One of the things we really work on is to help people wake up to the impact that the way they listen has on another person. We tend to not appreciate how much impact listening has. Like if we're going to make a difference, we think we're going to make it with what we say. Okay. We rarely stop and go, maybe I'm making a bigger difference in the way I'm listening to this person. And when
Mhm.
you directly experience the fact that the way I listen to someone not only affects what I can hear, because like if I'm listening through, okay, bozo, go ahead and tell me how to fix this. I'm not
Mhm.
going to hear much, okay? But what it also does is affects what the other person's going to say. Because when you're try to speak into a pretty closed listening or one that's got you in a really tight box, I know for me, it gets really hard to get the right words out of my mouth, to stay coherent, to really express what I want to express. And yet, if I've got a really open and generous, curious listening, it draws my ideas forward. Sometimes I'll say things for the first time that I've never said before that happen right then that are like key to the breakthroughs that we need in order to be successful.
I love that. And I also appreciate that you have this focus on practice versus specific behaviors or rules because, all new behaviors actually, it's like they are skills. They're like a bundle of skills that we can't describe that well. I can think of one other, who else does this practice thing so well? The Toyota Kata also is like very focused on you're going to practice this. How long does it take somebody, or how long does it take a new, let's say you introduce this to a leadership team? How much practice does it take before, they have some competency?
Well, competency. Let me go. That's forever,
Yeah.
but to where it makes an impact
Yeah.
like we almost immediately. We do a 3-day intensive with the leaders in the company. And coming out of that and even inside of it, you start to see the impact that's happening. It is it's quite remarkable, actually. Like you start to realize, oh my God, if you're interested in influence action, what counts is what the other person said. No, excuse me. What counts is what the other person heard,
Mhm.
not what I said. We are so organized around, well, I said it. And
Yeah.
that's like, and they don't, and the other person didn't do what I asked said for. Well, I told them, well, yeah, but that's not a very good handoff. So that's like the quarterback saying, "Well, there was the running back that dropped the ball, when we fumble
Yeah.
it." Or I gave it to him, like instead of how do we learn to do this together so that we can actually get it across, so we can make clear like request of each other, so that the other person actually really gets what am I asking for? When
Mhm.
do I want it by? Why do I want this? How's it going to forward what we're up to? So that we get clear together. And if we can have good handoffs on commitments that are made, that will eliminate so much of the noise factor that's in an organization. Get a little bit of that happening. It doesn't take much for people to start to say, "Whoa, okay, let's get good at."
Yeah, I'm thinking about, I've had the good fortune to be part of maybe 2 teams where it was world class, a life-changing experience to be part of those teams, and several teams that were not, and there's certainly some similarities around how they work. So I love that you can start to I feel like this is going to increase the odds that you build that you build more teams
Exactly.
like that if you have this as a base at the company.
But sometimes there's a couple, either it's just the total chemistry of the group, or there's a couple leaders in that group who will be practicing something very similar, not even fully appreciating what they're practicing. Because that's what I did before the breakthrough and saw this is what we're actually practicing. And the cool thing was that once I saw it, I could now deliberately
Yeah.
practice and get way better at what was already having the success that I have been having, but didn't really appreciate where that was coming from.
Now it's
Okay?
explicit.
Yes.
For your success with the planarization company, how did you start to add and grow the collaborative way from there?
Well, it was one, Rodell was such a success, and they were in Delaware, and there it was well known their success, and
That doesn't
um,
hurt.
that helped.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
then a consultant who had worked with groups of CEOs approached me and said, "Lloyd, can you bring this way of working outside of Rodell?" And I said, "Yes, but I don't know the pathway, but if you could get some courageous CEOs together, I'm confident we will find that pathway." And
Mhm.
so that's how we started to take it outside of Rodell.
I love that. And I would say, I'm just thinking of some more jaded colleagues I've worked with where, there's a certain kind of stigma around consulting that, they have a framework to sell and it's got 5 steps or three. If it's really expensive, it only has three. And they're not invested in the solution. It's just, it's just a fad. In fact, there's always something that happens in really large enterprises where it's like, managers know they need to change their language to be, showing their support for whatever the fad is. But they also know maybe it's a fad. So they're kind of incentivized not to make too many changes. As long as we can talk the right way, I can just keep the ship going the same direction. How do you fight that tendency?
Well, one thing is that we tend to work in not exclude in privately held companies, so they're a little smaller, okay?
Hmm.
But they can be pretty big, is 3,000 like that. So, and when you're working, especially when you're working with owner operators, it's a different dynamic than what
Yeah,
you're talking about, okay?
yeah.
Okay, now we have been in some of those situations, and it's more challenging because there's more of what you're talking about,
Hmm.
and so the CEO brings us in. We actually get it, but the thing is, if you're actually practicing, it starts to cook, and you're starting to spread it, and people start going, well. First, it was the core team, and then they say, "Yeah, but if we're going to do this, I want my direct reports to practice too." And then they get them in, and then it starts working its way down the organization. The challenge you have is, and this is one of the biggest challenges to keep the practice alive, is you have a change of CEO.
Yeah.
And then do they want to do this? So often
Yeah.
they want to bring their own thing in. We've had pretty good, better success than because then the CEO comes in and they go to like one of these, oh God, what do they call them? A group me, a town hall or whatever.
Yeah.
The guys
Roadshow, town hall. Yeah.
and then they run into, and people actually speak straight. They actually stand up and ask the CEO the
Yeah.
hard question, or then,
That's
and
not
it's like,
okay.
"Whoa, how did you get these people to do this?"
Yeah.
And then they start to either fully support it or tacitly support it. Okay,
Yeah.
it it's more robust than I could have imagined. So even when it's not directly, once it's established, even if it's not directly supported by the top, there's a
Mhm.
lot of pockets of it still practicing. And then we've seen a new CEO come in, find out about it, and re-energize the whole thing again. So I do appreciate the challenges you're talking about because that's tough. But here's the deal: even if you get yourself into, if you've gotten a chance to practice, you can still practice, even because you do it with your customers who aren't practicing, and
Mhm.
get far better results with your customers than you do without practicing. So it has
Yeah,
as
it's
you
like,
get,
where is your sphere of influence? Regardless, if you can't do the whole company, you can do
yeah,
the people you work, you can, improve your relationship with them, your customers, your direct
right,
clients. And yeah,
yeah.
that's a very good point. Yeah.
Now we like to really work hard to do the whole company, and that's where we aim. Though in a few places it's been implied as for a team inside of a larger or a department inside of a larger company. That has happened, but our primary focus is towards the whole companies.
So one thing I've been involved in, I've worked in companies that were very into lean at different points in time. And one of them even won like a Shingo Prize, a big lean award. And it was very interesting to me. There were pockets, there were pockets that people were like, they were true believers. They were really into it, and they got some of the benefits of some of the good parts, and other people just didn't care. It was like not what they're doing, didn't concern them. And I've seen this actually a couple different places, a similar effect that there's some core group that's into it or they're getting some benefit, but they can't seem to kind of connect the benefits to who they would like to influence. How do you do this? Because I can imagine, certain business operators might really understand these five principles that you're talking about and see it, but there can be other groups where it's like, I don't, they don't get it. How do you bring them in?
Well, for one thing, like with any real cultural thing, it takes leaders in the company, leaders of the practice. Okay. So one of the important things is to establish those leaders and support those leaders in their practice so that they can support others in their practice. Because that's when it's the real deal, is when it's being supported at the front line at where we're doing the work.
Mhm.
And the other thing is the results. Now, sometimes you'll have old school kind of managers who are just want to be, authoritarian or
Yeah. Yeah.
listen, what the hell would I want that for? Or
Yeah.
be for them. No, I just want the job done and that's it. And well, they start to not fit.
Yeah.
And they
For the
start
whole culture, they're no longer like a culture fit at that company.
they start to stick out
Mm.
and they start to usually many times they'll leave themselves because they can feel this is not what there's a company down the road that I can do this and be successful, okay?
Yeah,
But there's still a lot of places that do business that way. So
yeah. I think Microsoft tried a culture shift with, like, nonviolent communication for their leaders, and I know that definitely, some people decided that was not for them.
yes.
Yeah,
So and then in some cases, you have to let some people go because they're just so far away from it. Now, not you don't have to be a master, and people have various levels of skill in each of the practices, and it's all working together to accomplish this. So I see that somebody didn't really get hurt. I'll interrupt in the thing, or it looks like they didn't get hurt, and I'll check in. I'll say, no, I just want to make sure we understood what you had to say right then.
mhm,
So as people help the interactions, is this what you were saying? Yeah, that's exactly yes, but not exactly. And then they have a chance to get heard. And the person not that was like kind of ready to run on as if they has a chance, another shot at taking a listen to what the person was saying.
mm.
Or in strong enough teams that have been working together a while, somebody might just even say, "Hey, Mac, can you tell me what Jim just said? What's your understanding of what he said?"
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
best. Yeah,
you
"Oh,
take care of
no,
it.
I was
So,
asleep."
"Hey, I guess well, it sounded like you said this." And then, "Hey, is that what you said?" "Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying at all."
Yeah. Love it. So I love this approach. And for someone who's interested in learning more and getting started, where would you, like, as we wrap up, where would you direct them?
Well, one to our website, the collaborativeway.com.
Mhm.
And then you can also, we have a couple books that are available at amazon.com, Amazon.com, and that one's called The Collaborative Way, a story about engaging the mind and spirit of a company. And the other one is Leading the Collaborative Way, overcoming the 7 most common pitfalls.
Mhm.
So, so those are 2 books, and then we also have a booklet there, but you can just look Collaborative Way and you'll
Collaborative
see
way.
it.
Thanks so much, Lloyd.
Hey, a great pleasure. Thanks for your questions. I appreciate it.